Now there's a lot more to this than just top speed, and these were the almost absolute perfect weather conditions for the bike. I'm going to split this video up into 3 parts. The first part is going to be me explaining a little better on why I chose a 15-tooth front sprocket. The second part is going to be installing it, the tools that you need, things like that. And the third part is going to be a run through of the tests that I made and the proper time when to put this 15-tooth sprocket on, where to ride it at, things like that. So I made this post not too long ago on Reddit. It was probably about 2 weeks ago when I first put the 15-tooth front sprocket on my bike. I was very excited. The Reddit users were not as excited. So I don't know what it is about a 15-tooth sprocket in this bike, but it makes people sort of upset. I had a little bit of backlash on it. People were questioning why I would do this to this bike. I need to put a 13-tooth front sprocket on it and actually ride it how it's meant to be. But the way that I see it is this is a dual sport bike, and I am riding it exactly how it's meant to be. I'm riding it on road. I'm going to be doing a lot of off-road next year when I take on the Trans-America Trail. Now this is a 5,000 mile trip all the way across the United States from Tennessee to Oregon, and it is mainly off-road. The reason that I really needed this 15-tooth front sprocket is because I needed options really for the trip back, but if something goes wrong while we're there and we need to get somewhere quickly, throw the 15-tooth front sprocket on, jump on the freeways when we get there. For the way back, it's going to be 2,500 miles of either freeway or back roads. I prefer freeway because freeway speeds are quite a bit faster, they're more consistent. The back roads are hilly, windy, and it's not all the time that you're going to be able to travel at that 55, 60 miles per hour average all the time. But again, it's only for options, and I really do like how this 15-tooth has made the bike on the road. When I'm going to be doing a majority of road riding, I think I'm just going to leave the 15-tooth on there for 90% of the time. Any other time, any of my off-road riding, anything like that, I am going to leave the 14-tooth front sprocket on my bike. It is just better, low end. I don't really need to keep the RPMs down when I'm just off-road or on the back roads. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to explain to you how to install the 15-tooth front sprocket. So you're going to need a ratchet, an extension for that ratchet, a 10mm socket, an 8mm socket, a 24mm socket, a torque wrench, another 24mm wrench, a Sunstar front sprocket, and a new chain guard. First thing you're going to do is remove the 2 bolts to get rid of the stock chain guard. You'll notice that when I take this off, on the stock chain guard there's a little metal bracket. This little metal bracket stops you from putting the stock chain guard back on. This is why you need the aftermarket one. Next, you're going to loosen the rear axle bolt. This is why you need the second wrench. Hold the axle in place. Then you're going to loosen the chain tensioner on both sides. You're going to want to drive this in pretty far so you can get the chain off of the rear sprocket. Next, you're going to let it down, pushing the rear tire closer to the bike, loosening the chain. And now you're going to start removing the sprocket itself. It has 2 bolts, neither of which are very tight. After you get those off, you have to work on the little metal clip holding it in place. A screwdriver might be beneficial here to get you started. Next, you're just going to remove the sprocket and the chain together. And then when you're reinstalling the new one, you have to put the chain onto the sprocket before you slide it into place, or else there will not be room to fit the chain in between the engine and the 15-tooth front sprocket. Put the clip back on. It only goes on in one way. The holes are offset. These you're going to torque down to 10 Newton meters or 7.5 foot-pounds. Next, you're going to want to tighten up that chain tensioner. Set your chain slack back to where it needs to be. Tighten up the rear axle and torque it to 37 foot-pounds or 50 Newton meters. Last thing you're going to want to do is put this chain guard on. This is just a safety thing. You don't really need one, and also I'm going to link the chain guard below, but this one did not come with bolts to install it onto your bike. The bolts that I bought are going to be in the description. I got them at Home Depot. They're zinc coated. I really wanted stainless steel ones, but I could not find them. But they are M6-1 millimeters, and they're 50 millimeters long. The head is 10 millimeters, which is pretty standard throughout the whole bike, so that is pretty nice. So now we're getting into the tests. And before I show you these tests, I kind of want to explain a couple of things to you. When I ran all of these, they were mostly all in one day. The weather was perfect. It was about 70 degrees. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't windy. It wasn't raining. I'd say that these are definitely the ideal conditions for riding with the 15-tooth front sprocket, especially on the freeway, because when there's just a little bit of wind, you really feel it. You get blown all around. You can come up on cars, but as soon as you try to pass them, all the wind hits you, slows you right down. It definitely struggles on the freeway if there is, say, a 9-mile, 10-mile-per-hour wind. I did test it on one of these days, and it struggled to keep 70 miles per hour. It did keep 70 miles per hour, but it struggled, and the gas mileage was horrible. On a decent day, gas mileage is about 55-60 miles per gallon, which isn't too bad because with all of the mods that I've done to my bike, it gets about 63 miles per gallon with the 14-tooth on back roads. And that leads me to another thing, is that this is not a stock bike. And if you're watching this video but have not watched my last one, then make sure you jump over there to figure out what all I've done to this bike. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and show you the tests. Okay, so first up is going to be the 0 to 60 test on the 14-tooth front sprocket. As you can see, the bike almost lifts off the ground. I'm not even trying. There's a lot of force back in between every single gear. And I don't know if you heard, but in between the first and second gear, they are kind of awkwardly wide apart from each other, so it's kind of hard to hit. There was 60. Yeah, so pretty quick. Next up here is going to be the 15-tooth 0 to 60. Not as much lift on the takeoff. It still kind of fights. You can see the motor does have some power all the way up to about 5th gear. Then you start to lose it. 6th gear really bogs down. There's a big difference between 5th and 6th gear, and it really struggles to pull it when it's windy out. Yep, there it was. Next is 0 to 30 off-road 14-tooth. Broke loose, but it did catch itself back up pretty quickly. I don't know exactly where the 30 miles per hour is. I'll have to look at it here later, but I do know that it did get there quite a bit faster, and it did reach it faster before I hit that little hill that you saw there at the end of the track. Okay, next is the 0 to 30 off-road 15-tooth front sprocket. Now that you can tell right there the huge difference between 1 and 2, which is not really good for off-road. You kind of want to be able to shift through the gears pretty quickly and still have the RPMs to pull the bike around. I mean, it did fine off-road, but again, this test doesn't really mean too much to me because I am more focused on the freeway riding version of it, but I figured I just had to include it for the people who did want to keep 15-tooth on there for the entire lifespan of the bike. Okay, next is the 14-tooth uphill climb. It is a pretty rocky hill. It's not very steep, but it is pretty long. Takeoff was good, didn't break loose. You can hear it bouncing around. Okay, made it pretty quickly. Let's check out the 15-tooth now. Again, takeoff pretty good. It's a really, really rough ride up this hill. Made it pretty quickly. Not as fast as the 14-tooth, and I guess that doesn't really matter. I think the biggest thing in a dual sport that people look for is not how fast it does it, but if it does it. And yes, this bike absolutely can do it with a 14-tooth, with a 15-tooth. I think your 13-tooth would probably be the best off-road. I've never tried it. 14 is perfect, like I said, for me. But maybe sometime in the future I will jump over to a 13-tooth sprocket. So in conclusion, I'd say that this 15 tooth is good in mild weather and decent road conditions. This means no rain, no wind. You're not gonna want too many hills, and you're also gonna want it to be pretty cool out so you don't overheat the engine. Luckily, the 15 tooth does lower the RPMs by quite a bit, so you can cruise at 70 miles per hour below 7,000 RPMs, which is great. So I don't think that you're gonna have any overheating problems, but when you're driving it revved out like that for such a long time, I would get a little worried about it. I don't believe that it increased my top speed at all. I wasn't really going for that. I was very shocked to find out that I was going 82.5 miles per hour. Now this was measured with my phone GPS as well as my GoPro GPS, and they were pretty close. And then my speedometer that was on the bike, which seemed to be 2 to 3 miles per hour slower than the GPS. I think I trust the GPS more because this changed between the 14 tooth and the 15 tooth sprocket on my bike speedometer. The 14 tooth sprocket was about 2 miles per hour below, and the 15 tooth sprocket is about 2 miles per hour above. So I tend to trust the GPS a little bit more when it comes to this. For those that are interested, you can buy a 37 tooth rear sprocket which will roughly do the same thing that a 15 tooth front sprocket does. I know some people like the rear sprocket over the front. The only issue with this is that you can only buy aluminum, which I would be worried about wearing down pretty quickly, especially on the freeway. It's pretty expensive. It's around $100 to get. All of this I spent roughly $45 on. Now that's the sprocket, the bolts, and the chain guard, the front chain guard. Also, the rear sprocket ships all the way from China. If you are interested in that, then I'm gonna link it below. They have a lot of other options. They have 38, 39, all the way down to 37 teeth. Okay, well, I think that is it. So if you liked this video, let me know. If you didn't like this video, still let me know. Throw a comment down there, send me a message. Subscribe for updates on future videos. And if you have a question or you want to see something specific, just tell me. I'll try and bring out a video for it.